Hey everybody, my name is Sean Robinson, and with me, as always, is Carson Grubaugh, the
The
hand,
hand.
the hand of the patriarchy,
Yeah.
uh, fatherless hand of the patriarchy. And today we're going to be talking about a book that Carson picked up on a book hunting tour. And Carson, what's the name of this bookstore that you picked this up at? Ollie's is the name?
No. This one came from John King
Right.
Used in Rare Books in Detroit, which I have that video of the trip that me and Tori took, it was the biggest bookstore I've ever seen in the world. And they had these they had like 1 through 5 and 7 and 11 or something out of 12. And I just grabbed them on a whim because it looked like there was some old like inking technique stuff. I did a video kind of flip through of a few of them, but we've ordered now all 12 of them
Right.
because we still haven't done a deep dive into them. But we thought this material looks really good and it looks like it's in the public domain. And so we wanted to undertake like a preservation project. And so now we're going to make videos flipping through them together more carefully, one at a time. And then this one, Division 1, has already been scanned and turned into a PDF. It's kind of a low res PDF because Patreon has pretty low file sizes, but it's up on our Patreon now for free. It's not behind a paywall. You don't have to be a patron to get it.
Right.
But we're pretty sure it's in the public domain. If it's not, let us know. We'll take it down.
And
But
we're looking into potential publication of some edited version of this. That's my research goal for today and tomorrow. So dibsies.
yeah, dibs. Does dibs work in public domain? I guess just like Sean will do the best job reproducing it. So
Right.
So we're just gonna, I still haven't even read these. We're gonna flip through and just kind of look at what this is. This is Division 1. There's 12 of these. So we'll do a video for each one as I get them scanned and we're ready to post. So each one comes with a poster. This is a do it at home course, but this looks like stuff you could hang in a classroom.
Right. And this is 1957 was the publication date for this, right?
47.
47, my apologies.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that the famous artist, series of stuff, also a going concern at the time, and also a really good curriculum that had a lot of real talents working there.
Yeah, this is crazy. In one of them I saw there's an article by Leyendecker. There's an article and interview with Rockwell. Frank King does something, and the list of contributors here has Rockwell, Maxfield Parrish, Charles Dana Gibson. The reason I got really excited about these is I showed them in that haul video, and then one of our subs mentioned in the comments that Charles Schultz worked for this company before he did Peanuts, just as someone who would mark up your drawings that you sent in and send them back.
Right.
So someone out there potentially has some Charles Schultz drawings.
Make it simpler.
Yeah.
Less lines.
So this is cool. It's a structure drawing. It's a really thorough course. I mean, I don't think any of it's, well, some of it would be non-standard today because they talk about lettering and inking pens. So they have instructions of how to go through the thing, directions for submitting the work, because it was a mail-in course.
Right. And so rather than being available through a bookstore or whatever, this publication was available as part of the mail-in course.
Yeah, and the company shuttered in 2018, I believe. Like this company ran up until 2018. Like when I was trying to find out how much of this is available or not, they shuttered in 2018.
That's wild. Are you serious?
Yeah, this was like a functioning company until then. So maybe they did renew it, but some of this stuff seems so out of date. I can't imagine. And when we look at the Division 2,
socially out of date.
Yeah, some of it. So it's like, it's really rudimentary and then really builds, drawing an outline, structure, how to create a basic structure.
You and I have talked a lot about the division that is presented to somebody who's used to a sort of fine arts approach to drawing, where, at least after the 70s, and sort of functional drawing instruction has really belabored the point about observation and, do you really know there's an arm back there? Like, the structural thing out is basically gone out the window since the sort of Betty Edwards approach took over in a fine art instruction context, where
Yeah.
you're emphasizing what literally you can see, basically the visual mechanism taking precedent, whereas this is sort of a earlier practical instructional illustrational standpoint, like more like an what's the name of the guy who did figure drawing for all?
Oh, Loomis, Andrew
Loom
Loomis,
Yeah, more like a Loomis sort of approach, where
or
you're
Vern
encouraged.
Hogarth.
Right, Hergoth as well. Yeah, where you're encouraged to see the underlying structure so that you can potentially manipulate that structure absent any reference.
Yeah, and in the, I'm also posting like the things that I share, the assignments and the lectures I give my students are coming out slowly on our channel, and a little bit faster on the Patreon. I mix the two approaches because they're both
Right.
valid, right? And it's weird how you go through these times where like one approach dominates. And I think we're lucky that we're in an era where things are opening back up to multiple approaches, but that's one of the reasons something like this, to get it back on the record in a significant way, so people can start taking that, drawing with the right side of the brain. That's the book you're referring to,
Yeah.
Betty Edwards. Yeah, with this more structural approach.
Yeah.
And if you watch the videos I've put up already on
Right.
YouTube, I kind of describe the 3 different perceptual outlooks that I think each one of those styles covers, and how the brain can flip through those. And
Yeah. Betty Edwards is the I don't know how you want to describe her, the juggernaut that smashed all other art instruction approaches basically from 1970 on.
and I'll admit I haven't read that book. I know the approaches that come out of it.
Okay.
But to me, she's more about what I talk about, like hand-eye coordination
Mm-hmm.
stuff, like feeling the world with your eyes,
Right.
which is a
And it's
more
a fantastic.
three-dimensional approach.
Yeah, and it's great as a foundational, as a foundational document, and especially if you were like a high school art teacher like I was, and you're getting a mix of students that their visual abilities are zero to a kid that can draft as well as you can the first day they come into the class, which
Yeah.
happened 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
In the 1,000 students I taught.
I mean, it happens to me almost every semester. I get some kid that's ready to be a pro.
Right.
But this is a different, more analytical approach,
Right.
and instead of a responsive approach. And I
Right.
think that the more you can flip back and forth between the two.
Yeah, this
But
is
I
the
think this
architectural
has some,
constructive versus responsive.
yeah, that's a good way to put it too. So dealing with outline, drawing in tone, and the 2 main writers in this are, it seems like when I flip through, Frederick D. Calhoun and Bart, just this mononym Bart. But I like this constructive approach that you're talking about, because they do take it, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then it's broken into the divisions, which is important. Like, it's one of the things I'm always trying to teach my students, is not just structure in terms of can you structure an object, but understanding the structure of the course of your instruction itself. Is like, why did your teacher do these things in these order? Why did, they could have done this in a number of different ways. Like, teaching drawing is, understanding drawing is kind of like a 5-dimensional, 7-dimensional subject, but we have to lay it out in a linear order. So, why did the instructor structure the course in this way? And I think this is a very thoughtfully structured book.
Mm-hmm.
Could be structured different, but it's a approach that I take, which is the deep abstract linear structures first, and then you pile the value on top. So you like build
Right.
the building, architectural, and then you add on top. A lot of people might start with value and then work backwards to like see what's at, and then maybe that's the Betty Edwards, see what's at the
Right.
surface and then work back to the abstract underneath.
Right.
Either way is fine. I might even teach it backwards one semester just to see what happens, but this is that architecture approach. So then some lessons in 2-point perspective. I like this right here. They're showing to get an accurate vanishing point,
Right.
like how far off your paper you got to put it. And I don't know, I got to go through and read it, but like this is always something that's baffled me. Like, where are people getting these long ass rulers? Where are they having the paper that goes all the way to the other side of the wall to get accurate? That's one of the reasons I quit drawing comics. I was so sick of dealing with like 5 pieces of paper taped on to get the perspective I want. We need to have Gerhard on because he's got hacks for that.
I've got a yardstick, by the way, that I use for that type of stuff. But yeah, there are cheats for that, but they're fairly complex, and I've never mastered them well enough to not be able to not be able to do them without referencing the cheats. You can make like a portion mark that gives you like there are manuals written around the same time, but they're like you can get a 200-page book on 2 and 3-point perspective, and buried in there is like, when you're doing this, you can make a little anchor point here and use that anchor point to reference, but yeah.
We'll have to figure that out someday. I don't know. These days, just trace a photograph or mock it up and.
Well, you can. Yeah, that's the other thing is if you have a prepared grid, you can use that on your light board or whatever as a guide. But if you get pretty experienced with that stuff, you can also freehand it fairly well. And unless you're doing like tile or a repeating object like that, you can get something fairly believable just by eyeballing it.
I like here that they're giving photographs, so like of different ellipses.
Mm-hmm.
It's a circle. So this is an old style text where it's like refer to figure 10, and figure 10 hopefully is on the same page, but I think it's pretty good visual explanations of everything, referencing the photo versus the drawing, again showing the structure within there. I call this trick number 1 in perspective, finding the midpoint of things. This is the kind of stuff that I grabbed the book for and that I find particularly interesting, because I think it's the stuff that is most lost in terms of a training regimen for the tools. So use of materials, and this is very basic, like here's a T-square, here's a triangle, here's why you'd use these different ones in these different ways. Even in ergonomics, how to sit at the board without screwing yourself up like I have,
Right.
And
I'll be looking at your paper flat so that you're not making everything look elongated.
Yeah. And it has, pencils, erasers, ink, pens, brush. Advice for drawing with the pencil point. And then it will give a drawing submitted for criticism. So I think it would be fun now that you've got what's the Instagram handle for Living the Line?
Living the Line Books, or okay. Living the Line Art. Living the Line Art.
Living the Line Art. Okay. So I think it would be cool to have people do these and just submit them to, once they get the PDF, like everyone share their drawings.
Oh yeah.
That would be cool. I want to get more like interactive stuff like that. So if you share stuff like that, just at Living the Line Art, or like, I don't know, hashtag Living the Line, would be cool. Human figure and illustration. They have a lot of cool photos.
By the way, that photo right there, just tossing it out there. If anybody doesn't have access to the Edward Muybridge series of books that he did, I would really recommend those as far as studying the figure in motion. Dover put out a pretty good compilation of his animal ones and his human ones, and as far as like basic walk cycles and stuff like that, it's really hard to beat Edward Muybridge. If you guys don't know him, he's the father of moving photography. Allegedly invented his method of capturing motion in photography on account of trying to settle a bet about a horse
Whether all 4 feet come off the ground or not was the bet,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
And not allegedly, assuredly murdered his wife's lover.
Oh,
When he got a letter from his wife's lover, he went over to the guy's house because his address was on there, and he answered the door. The guy answered the door, and he said, "My name is Edward Moybridge." Um, I don't remember, something very very classy. And then
and
he
then
killed the
murdered
guy.
him.
Yeah,
Wow,
and
I
then
did not know that about Edward Moybridge. What was the
he
consequence of that? Did he go
he
to
was
jail?
found not guilty by the jury, who
Oh,
agreed with
dang.
his sentiment.
Well, I mean, good. Animation is because of him. I would say also
Canceled, Edward.
um, put on a GIF of someone doing athletics, so it's the same motion on a repeat. And I tell my students to do that a lot because it's actually in motion, and so you're responding to the motion instead of the frozen. But the Moybridge is really good too. So a lot of this is probably, well, this is all text. A lot of this early stuff especially is stuff that I'm sure most people have encountered. Most people that would be watching our channel have encountered, looking at how to think about a human as existing inside of a box for perspective. This is some of the stuff that I think is historically funny, is they'll break down into specific categories like animal draftsmanship and how you're drawing a dog, and then they'll put the same type of thing here, like how the dog fits into the box. Like that's a whole own category. That's something that I find odd about old ways of thinking about drawing, because once you understand the principles, it doesn't matter whether it's a human or a dog or whatever, you should be able to draw it.
Yeah, but I think they're drawing you to that here. I mean, you can say that, and that's one thing, but it's another thing to actually have a demonstration of it right here. Especially like when it comes to things like, you really get into trouble when you have things like horses, where there's anatomical differences that are so different in terms of the leg structure.
So I will say I drew a horse once out of my head, and I had the knees backwards on the front legs. So there's anatomical stuff. Like, I guess I'm talking about drawing from observation, once you know how to observe, but to construct it from your mind. Yeah. And here, speaking of horses, the head and the feet of the horse.
Yeah.
And
see, I needed this
drawn
book.
a horse with this going the other way. And I do think they have some anatomy of horses. It's also interesting which animals they pick. Kind of gives you a sense of, what most people were drawing in 1947. Then here's the cool stuff. Practice exercises in pin handling.
But before we go to this section, I have to say, Edward Moybridge went to Calistoga to track down his wife's lover. Upon finding him, Moybridge said, "I have a message for you from my wife," and then shot him.
Wow, that is classy. I didn't know Moybridge was that much of a gangster.
No,
that's gonna make it into all my art appreciation classes now.
He was really something else. He was a wild guy. I always thought, structurally, spoilers for Strange Death of Alex Raymond. Skip ahead 30 seconds if you don't want to be spoiled. When I realized, when I was reading this, a couple pages at a time as Dave was faxing them to me, that the book was going back in time, I thought for sure that it was going to end with Edward Moybridge. But alas, we never got there. He was super nutty guy, and was very outside of his time in terms of philosophically and morally, might not be the right word, ethically. He seemed to exist in his own universe,
obviously.
And as a guy who is the foundational figure for both motion pictures and comics and animation, I mean, he's an interesting nexus, and he's an interesting guy to be that nexus of, different
that
things.
makes sense why you would think it's going back to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Spoilers over. Sorry.
Yeah. Spoilers over. So this is the stuff when I flipped through that I saw it and I grabbed it without reading, because we keep coming back to, and I kept coming back to while I was trying to learn how to draw the right way for Strange Death. Was there a set of practice exercises that they did with the pens and brushes and what was being
Mhm.
taught in the schools and what was being passed around the studio. So I saw this and I thought, oh, this is awesome. This is kind of like that pen book that you showed where they're showing the different strokes. And
Right, the
then they,
Guptill book,
yeah,
drawing and rendering in pen and ink.
yeah. And they're showing here's different patterns that you can do with different type of pen, different types of thicknesses to achieve. So that's a pretty basic like hatching and cross hatching. And then they have this. I started thinking this is extra interesting here.
Hmm.
This is more like the stroke sheets that I came up with, where you're
Right.
practicing doing it this way and you're practicing doing it this way. Can you get a flat line going either way? And they're making these with the pins, and there's and some of the posters in the later ones showing them having their dip pins on the side to render these rectangular marks. So I think they're doing this with the crow quill pins, like these flat marks.
Yeah, flat lettering nibs. Yeah.
No, I think they're doing it like just by putting the crow quill on its side and dragging it.
Oh, really?
Like if you rotate it over towards the, I think
Huh.
so. It's in a future book that we'll get to. There's a poster of them and it looks like he's holding a crow quill. And then they start moving that into, obviously with those you can construct the lettering, and then they have lettering with the brush, and then something to cash in, read this. So there's some kind of contest or something. And then pen drawing for reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one that I said, well, we got to buy this book. So they're talking explicitly about the idea of aspect ratio, and also that things are always going to get shrunk. And so they have an explanation of reproduction terms. They show the same size reproduction of the brush drawing. They talk about how large to draw for certain things, and then they'll show like the reductions. So
Mm-hmm.
the actual original size of the drawing and then the print size of the drawing.
This is something that is also has some overlap with that rendering in pen and ink book. The first time that I really encountered a demonstration of that, I thought it was a really interesting, way to conceptualize it, and you really see, the differences in that. I was talking to somebody recently, giving them some advice about a book. They might be watching right now. And I recommended going to the local copy center and taking something and just reducing it a few different scales to get an idea of what you can gain and lose when you're shrinking down. And that's definitely like a easy way to get an idea of what you need when you work for reproduction. I know the first time I had something reduced, I had drawn 100 pages of something already. And I went through and reduced it, and I was like, where it happened to all my big lines?
Yeah.
It's a shocking thing when you realize that you don't get the same visceral impact of that big old brushstroke when it's not so big anymore.
Yeah, or what you lose. I mean, I could confidently go super tiny knowing you were going to capture it, but for most people,
Right.
what you lose when you go tiny. But it works in reverse too, because I remember when we did the Sergio Topi video,
Right.
when I printed his work out, when I blew it back up to size, it still baffled me. He's still bafflingly good, but it seemed less intimidating and it
Right.
seemed less chaotic. Like
Yeah.
it made more sense almost. So going both ways for your art, see what it reproduces. But if you're trying to learn about someone else,
Right.
that's why when we do the reproductions, or like
Right.
when I was doing the Alex Raymond stuff, I kept asking Dave, what size was the original? Because
Right.
you really, to understand what the artist is doing, that's a huge part of analyzing someone's style, is what size do they work at? Can you reproduce things at that size? And then each book has lettering, because like, window lettering, and this was all hand lettering, was like a total career you could do back then.
Yeah, and it was also a great way for cartoonists to make money, even if they didn't have illustration work. That's an underlooked thing. This was especially the case with Japanese cartoonists who post-war had a lot less opportunities. There are a lot of cartoonists, like in fact Mizuki, who we looked at a few of his later works. He worked as like a essentially like a storyteller with signs, with this, but he like did sign painting type stuff and as well. And that was a really common overlapping job for a beginning illustrator.
As
Because
did the guy that did Barefoot Gin. Uh, there's a whole section, like a whole book of one of the volumes of Barefoot Gin is kind of him being a sign painter and learning to be a sign painter, and kind of the struggles he went with some of the other like there was a master and then the other kids under that guy. There was some infighting between them, and that's recorded in that book. And that's where he learned his drawing abilities. That's the guy that taught him perspective, and that's where he learned all the skills to become the artist that he became.
Yeah, you got to imagine small town America. You maybe there's a job for an illustrator at the local paper or whatever, but signs are everywhere. And before you could print, you couldn't. There weren't just large format one-off printers. So somebody as a hand letterer could go up to the local business and paint their window or paint the sign that's out on their board. There was a lot of work like that floating around.
Yeah, which totally gone now. Now you just go to local Signs Plus and have an acrylic
Right.
print out. And then here's the applications of the Vision 1 study. Here's the practice exercises, lessons. They do these chalk talks, talk about a really like out of date genre of way to make money doing art is going and drawing cartoons live in front of an audience and talking about them. That's where, from what I've seen in the Division 2, we're actually going to have to get rid of one of the chalk talk chapters, because it pushes so far into inappropriate that even us like totally don't edit the record people felt uncomfortable with it. But I guess we could show it on the video. It's pretty bad. And then some practice exercises, like simple line drawings, like just practice making circles. Really simple line drawing exercises, what I think is good. And then some advice on making artwork pay. So some practical advice on the business of it. And then just a little like fun lesson at the back about basically looks like Rorschach test blotter silhouettes.
The silhouettes thing is really interesting. Not to give too much away in one video, but I'm working on a book about possibly the best pen and ink artist who's ever lived. And this person, who we will discuss at a later date, started out as a kid making silhouettes with scissors.
But not these blotter silhouettes.
No, but the silhouette was a weirdly prevalent thing at the time. We would say at the time. I mean, I'm talking like a 50-year chunk of time that was a very interesting like thing to people. I don't know if it's just because like shadow plays and things like that.
Well, people were getting portraits made that way too, right? You would go
Right.
stand behind a canvas or something and be illuminated from the back, and then the artist would basically trace out your silhouette and paint it in black.
Right, exactly. There's like a dozen different examples of that. There was some early animation that was done purely silhouette. It's a very interesting
shape-based focus that there may be a predilection for that at some point for some reason, like solid, simple shapes over complex images.
I'm not sure what the draw is, but it is interesting that it just seems to have completely evaporated. I mean, I can't think of any notable work. And well, no, I suppose I can think of one or two exceptions.
Kara Walker,
right?
is like super blue chip fine artist who works in silhouettes. One of the things, and maybe I could pull up her work real quick since we're talking about it. One of the things that
I had a book of hers a couple years back I really enjoyed.
Yeah, she's a really great African American artist, and she uses the silhouette because of the ambiguity. And so I think that's part of the, let me see if I can find her most famous piece. I'll screen share here. She's moved on to other things, but she got famous with these big silhouette pieces.
Right.
And the reason she's using silhouette is because the spatial ambiguity of the silhouette leaves for interpret, like Austin Powers had that super famous scene
Right.
in the tent, right, where
Right.
he's playing with the ambiguity. And so she uses that to talk about like implicit biases or whatever. So like your assumptions, or speaking about like the historical assumptions about blacks in America, are being potentially mapped onto these images, like this lady just popping out babies or whatever.
Right.
But if you saw that fully rendered, there's a potential that there's something not that your interpretation there is incorrect, and so you're partially responsible for that. Same here, like, is the kid getting a blowjob, or is that just like his belt? If
Right.
you see a blowjob, or if you see a kid up the lady's skirt instead of standing next to her, then you're the one bringing that to the interpretation. You're bringing your conclusions to it. So I think silhouette play, I don't know if that's part of what that original kind of wave of silhouette play was taking advantage of psychologically, if that lined up with Freudian things coming into the world.
That's interesting. I'd be curious to sort of look at that as like a, just to sort of do a technique study and see where that exactly came about. It's also possible it's one of those things that, falls into the survivor bias, problem where if this really was like a folk art that was around all the time, there's a reason we don't have it anymore. It's because paper doesn't survive like that. If it was just, somebody made a paper doll for their kid and they're, did plays with it or whatever, it doesn't last, right?
Yeah.
In the same way that like work on canvas in oils does.
I'm realizing, Sean, that we should be the go-to channel if you need a topic of research for your thesis paper, because like the historical significance and the cross-pollination between disciplines, the interdisciplinary nature of why silhouettes rose to popularity, how that lined up with the release of Freudian studies, blah, 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 blah. We got some of that on I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we got some of that on the art restoration one too. A really rich philosophical kind of study there about, when people will accept and why they would accept a revision versus the original. So yeah. I would love if you research any of these, also hashtag us. Let us read your thesis.
Well, thanks for following through on our flip through here. If you guys are interested in seeing a collection of these, or if you're a lawyer specializing in copyright, please drop us a line. Now, we're going to be looking into this, and as Carson was saying, we think there's some historic interest in these and some very, very valuable content. So thanks for scanning this for us, Carson.
Yeah, and if you just want to read it thoroughly for yourself, the PDF, I'll put a link. PDF for Division 1 is up on our Patreon. You don't have to be a patron to get it. It's not behind a paywall. We just wanted to share it and have it on the record. So I'll link that. Thanks for following along, guys. I hope you enjoy the book. Take it easy.
Yeah, have a good one.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.